All right, episode 3 of Before You Build. My name's Austin.
Eddie?
Just Eddie, huh?
Yeah, just Eddie today.
Cool. And we run and operate a company called Mana Construction Company. And today we are talking about the size of the building. And so size is one of the few decisions you don't get to adjust later. Once you sign up for it, you live with it. From your side, which you truly are the construction expert, why does size feel harmless, like when you're first getting started?
So sometimes you think, or the client would feel like, hey, this looks like enough space. They say, okay, looking at it, I'm going to do a small kitchen. This is what I'm going to do. Let's say a restaurant, right? This is a small kitchen. I'll do maybe 50 people out in the dining room. Okay. The question is, do you know what size you need your kitchen? Your kitchen is your main focus, right? If you can't supply the demand that's being required, then how do you perform? You can't. So yes, you have to kind of figure out what that layout is at first, and then start moving on to creating the dining room's space. So you don't want to restrict yourself and build too small, but at the same time, you don't want to oversize and build too big. You never, it's a difficult aspect to grasp, and it's not something easy. But you know your concept, you know what's driving, how much you're planning on, kind of, I want to say, how much traffic you're going to have coming in. So you plan accordingly, and you're going to have consultants that are going to help, from your kitchen design to, your traffic counts, how many people you anticipate having in there. And the more research you do, the more of that background information that you gather, the better you can make a decision on what size is going to fit my concept. So yeah, that's kind of the basis of the size, for any restaurant or office space or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's like anything else that we talk about, when we're kind of sketching this out. All these decisions seem like intuitive and almost like common sense, but there's so much more thought that is necessary for you to be, and I'm not just saying like you, random viewer, but just like in general, the person who's coming in and building, to be successful in this space, to ensure that the building supports your business over time and doesn't become a constraint. These are like the moments where you can get really thoughtful around how much is the ideal space. And you can be too small, right? We've seen that before, where somebody comes in. I think I was thinking of the example that you were thinking of, I think, where they had this vision for this big front of house, yet the back of house kitchen, it appeared wasn't going to be able to fit,
right,
to support such a large front of house. Yeah. So the vision and the dream was there, but then the execution in terms of the planning, before the build even starts, before a general contractor would typically get involved, there's times like in that scenario where it would be better to pause and reset and rethink it before you get into something like building, where more or less it's fixed.
Yeah, and it takes time to design that and figure out and tweak it to the point where it works and it's functional. You look at operations, you make sure that they're going to be able to function in that area with ease and produce what they need to produce for the front of house. We all want more seats, right? More seats means more money, means more people, means more, and the hard part with that is, like I said, if you don't have the kitchen that can handle that capacity, then your product isn't going to function. Your restaurant's not going to function. So yeah, that's always the biggest challenge is figuring out the layout that you need for your kitchen, and then working your way out from there. That is the most important aspect of the restaurant.
Working from the kitchen to the
To the
front house.
dining room, to the dining room, to everything else. Yeah.
And you're not a restaurant owner, right? But
No.
you've worked, as a general contractor. And so how is that? How are you able to say that with confidence being on that side?
So, since I'm not the owner, but I have dealt with the owner in regards to new builds that we've done. I've gotten a lot of interaction in regards to what makes operations work better. So with that information, I've been able to kind of assist in the reconfiguration of some of, I want to say, the equipment to better state, hey, this I think would function better here for this reason. The concern is cross traffic, right? There's a lot of that's a concern. So in construction, I can bring it up to them and specify, because I have some of that knowledge, is, hey, here's a concern. You're going to be crossing paths from, let's say, your topping station to your deep fryers. And you want to eliminate that. You want to make sure that's not happening, for the reason that, one, there could be a conflict where they run into each other. Operations, then, that causes concern, because you have, let's say, deep fried material, or I'm sorry, deep fried food, and then carrying that over to another area. And if it spills or if it falls on somebody, you want to make sure that's not going to be a concern. Like I said, it's maintaining that, I want to say, that streamline of the moving parts, to make sure that they don't intersect or interfere with each other. So I think that me as a contractor, I can give that information, that feedback, and express to the owner that, hey, here's a couple concerns that I see. I'm not here just to build it. I want to help whoever's, my client, to better succeed in their build. And I think that's a way that we can provide that information to them and say, hey, this could be something that, I don't know your full concept in regards to exactly what you guys do, or whoever the client is, exactly what they do, but I can provide a lot of feedback in regards to, hey, how can I make this more functional for you? What can be done to help create more ease in your day-to-day activities, or your all your employees, making sure that they're comfortable in a situation where, one is working on one side of the line, the other one's working on the other side of the line, and you have enough room in between where you're not rubbing up against each other, those kind of things. Also, the ease of maintaining the facility, right? You want to make sure that you have accessibility to, like, your floor sinks, for example, making sure that those are able to be exposed and cleaned every night. You want to make sure that, we make it as easy as possible for operations to be able to clean the whole restaurant, or whatever it may be, and make sure that it's it's the easiest path to travel. Something so minor as, for example, if you have carpet, if you don't have an outlet, what are you doing? You're carrying cord all the way across the way. Something that simple can make a difference. It can help operations in not having to go pull out an extension cord, not having to do, additional work just to complete a task that they have every day. So that's a task that is consistent, that's always going to be there. And yeah, why not make it easier? Now they can unplug, plug in wherever they need to. And there's accessibility throughout the whole, the whole location, the whole restaurant. So creating those floor drains throughout the back of house, making sure that, hey, when they mop and they squeegee, they can pull all that water to one location, versus trying to push it into some other location that has, that makes it much more time consuming because now they have to drag that water out to another area of the restaurant. So some of those, little things in construction that can help the operator on the back end.
Yeah, and I think that the key is, at least for us, like we're taking an operator first perspective on construction. And so when you put yourself in the shoes of an operator, you see things different. When you put yourself in the shoes of a retail shop owner, you see things different. And it's not like every single restaurant or every single retail shop is the same, but generally there are things that will matter no matter what the concept is.
Right.
And I think from the construction side, it's exciting to not only just take a set of plans and build it, but to think very creatively and be active in supporting the owner or the concept that's coming in, which to me is the difference between doing, like, for lack of better words, like stale construction execution, where ultimately everybody should in construction be striving to build it on time and on budget, and to look as excellent as possible.
Right.
Like, to me, where it becomes meaningful is like taking the expertise and helping and assisting the person who's coming in, so that building supports their business. And there are so many moments and so many decisions before you build that you can, again, it's not perfect, but you can set yourself up so much better. And size is certainly one of the most significant decisions you make. We were talking about the idea, do we talk about location or size first? And they're, arguably, two of the most important decisions you make.
Right.
And from a contracting or building perspective, hearing you talk about what's most important when it comes to size or why it feels harmless at first is really interesting, because it's all in the details. And for me, when I think about size, I think of like, what is the smallest space possible to make this work really well? And the reason I start there is, like, I think a lot of people, they come in with these dreams and aspirations to build it bigger. Like they want, is it a local place, and like they want the TVs and the games and the, the big dining room space and the bar and the kitchen. And there's just so much danger in adding more and more complexity, more space. It's like the same thing, with restaurants in general, like more menu items, more SKUs, more complexity, like equals like risk.
Yeah.
And so I think with size, like the smaller and more efficient you can make it, the less complexity you have, which allows you to, really show off what your dream really is, which is this product that you've made, right? Yeah. Like if it's sushi, like this incredible sushi spot, and you're trying to create this experience where people are eating this great food, having this incredible experience, like if you can get the space just right, like it can support that vision versus like strain it, and really, work against what you're trying to do, which is just like, if it's in restaurants, like I just want to serve people a great meal and leave them happy and express myself through the creation of this food. Not like, take care of this building or worry about it.
Right.
Which again, our argument is like, you need to pay attention to the building. It's part of your model. But there's these decisions, especially around size, that can really help set you up for success.
Yeah. I mean, how many times, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a restaurant. I've gone in, I've walked in, everything looks great, as far as the dining room, looks fantastic. You can see the chaos in the kitchen because you can tell that they kind of reduce the size for that same reason. And then not just that, you also see racks and other things outside. So in your hallways, going to the restrooms, sometimes you'll see, the racks with dry stock in those areas. Yeah, totally. It's unfortunate, It's one of those things where it's like, okay, they've learned that the space wasn't adequate for that particular, kitchen or, for that capacity. So they've had to bring additional and create ideas of where to put it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen stuff outside as well, which is crazy to me. And that's why it's like, one of the concerns is you do want to stay lean and mean, so you do want to stay tight.
Right.
But at the same time, you want to make sure that
you're considering. Well, yeah, and I think what you're saying is what I'm saying, but like to start off on the right foot, like I'm thinking small, and then like, okay, how do we prevent things like this happening? And I think that one of the things that we've danced over the years is like trash.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to like veer from your point because I'm trying to kind of group it together. But like trash has always been one of those items where like, where do we put it? Like like as we've gone smaller, because like you go smaller because you're going to pay more if you're bigger.
Right.
And you're going to add complexity, whether that's in rent. Rent isn't necessarily complex, saying you're going to pay more for rent, but then you add complexity when you have more square footage in a restaurant because of the cleaning and the maintenance and whatever's going to be in these spaces. All the things that we know happens, but like I think of trash as one of those funny items that as we've gone smaller, it's harder to find it like a place to put the trash, and so sometimes it ends up like into your example, like outside, which could be in the middle of the drive-through.
Yeah,
and so there is like you need to be able to consider all the facets of whatever you're building and make sure it's incorporated, so you don't end up in a situation where your trash is in the middle of the driveway or your dry stock is in the hallway to your bathroom.
Yeah.
Like none of the things that just like work against what your vision is. Or to your point at the very beginning, like where the kitchen is not big enough to support the volume.
Right.
And there's all these, really sophisticated equations to figure out, what size kitchen you need to drive the volume or your best, estimate. We've learned that lesson many times over the years. Our kitchen has gone bigger, it's gone smaller, like swells with the different times. But I think it's a great point. It isn't just about being small and lean and mean. It's about finding the perfect, in between.
Yeah.
And I would err on the side of smaller, and to challenge the construction team, to challenge our team to get everything in a smaller space. Because long term, it is the best for the business model. And depending on what state you're operating at, it can fluctuate the percentage of occupancy cost that you can afford to drive, what would be sort of the standard profit margin that you're looking for. And depending if it's like you're a franchise, if you're a franchisee, your margins are going to be smaller. And so it matters a lot, that occupancy cost. I mean, if you're like you're not in a franchise agreement and you can take more from the business, you're not paying franchise fees or royalties, you can maybe move that occupancy cost a little bit. But what I'm referring to in occupancy cost is your all-in number that you're paying for your space. So your rent, your CAM, like everything that you could put into this, number that you're going to pay for this specific space. And that percentage done on your, total sales is one of the numbers that, we look at to make a decision when we're deciding if we're going to go into a certain space or not. Right. And, we want to be around 10%, lower than 10% ideally, but it's not uncommon for retail and restaurants to be much higher than that. Right. And that's just setting yourself up for risk long term. And the bigger space you get, the more rent you're going to pay, and the higher that potentially that percentage goes. And if God forbid your sales come down, that percentage is going to go up. That's a cost that's not going down. Typically, there's rent bumps, frequently enough to make an impact, and so. Every single year that threat heightens unless you're offsetting it with more and more sales. And typically you see in especially restaurants, like at some point you kind of watch, yes, you do trend up and you trend up and you trend up, but at some point you do have these moments of plateau
Oh, yeah.
and even dips where those costs are extremely significant to your cash flow and your EBITDA, percentage in real, sort of EBITDA dollars you have available to build and reinvest, et cetera. So I can't overstate enough, like size matters.
It does.
And, from a contracting, from a building perspective, I love the details. Not so much like me, it kind of gives me anxiety, but hearing you talk about it, that's this sort of comfort that I have when we work together, right? On building a restaurant or a retail space, that you're going to have the ability to look at those, micro details and help set the restaurant up or the retail space up for success.
Yeah. I mean, we've done even larger ideas with certain companies. It's like, there's one in particular that I can think of where we built an outside structure, to assist their outside seating, because the interior seating was minimal. Unfortunately, the building wasn't big enough for I want to say for accommodating the kitchen and the dining room. So what are other options they had? Well, there was a breezeway in between the two buildings. Hey, why not build a structure there? So, they went and negotiated with the landlord, said, hey, we'll put in the capital to create this, but allow us to use it. And for the first 10 years, they said at no cost. So that's ideal. I mean, that's a win-win right there. Yes, you put in, on the front end, but you benefit for the next 10 years. Now, unfortunately, they're at the 10-year mark, and they don't know what's going to happen in regards to that. But they know that they've gained, and they've gained throughout the 10 years, and now it's
they've benefited from
exactly.
Yeah, thinking about the space in a creative way that is a win-win for both landlord and owner operator.
Right.
And that's the thing, like when we sit down and we look at a set of plans and we start to build, like there are so much that goes into it. And I was thinking about one of the builds that we kind of inherited through an acquisition, and we got into the store and the outlets were on the ceiling. And I can't recall if I think on the plans they called for
that. Yeah, that's the way
which doesn't make any sense to me. But as someone that lives in the restaurant, right, and has lived in the restaurant, and like you wouldn't do that, right? As a contractor, you would highly advise against that. And when you're an architect or you're a consultant, and you're sitting behind the desk and you're on the computer and you're designing these things, you have, let's just assume the best intentions, but like you're a human being. And so there are going to be mistakes, like no matter who you hire, and we're really the last stop before things get solidified. And candidly, like we will make mistakes where, in hindsight, we'll be like, oh, we learned this. I mean, most of these learnings have been from, either one being preemptive and like being able to like take knowledge and wisdom and move it forward, but also like doing it ourselves and being like, geez, like let's never do that again.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not outlets on the ceiling type of decision, but certainly like I can think of a few with like flooring and millwork and kitchen design. Yeah, things that you're like, geez, waterproofing, different things that, the materials we use in the back of house, for, keeping like discoloring in the ceilings, et cetera. So, you do learn a lot when you do it, but I think the overarching theme is like, there's a lot to think about. And when you have a contractor who's been there, who can look at the details, like it's very comforting. You know that, you're going to get, yourself in a good position to thrive. And I do think of like the one-off like mom and pop restaurants that I've been to that have that hallway, like the drinks in the hallway,
Yeah.
and it just it's tough to see,
Yeah.
because you just know that like with just a little bit of reworking, you could have probably prevented something like that
We could have
from
resolved
happening.
that issue. Yeah. No, I mean, I've gone to restaurants where clients are ready to move in. Excuse me. Uh, the kitchen, it was a restaurant previously. The kitchen, they wanted to utilize the existing equipment and kind of go from there. I said, okay, well, what kind of concept are you looking to bring in?
Right.
So they were, I was kind of, I was kind of taken back because I saw the condition of the equipment, I saw the condition of the space, I saw the condition of the kitchen, you know, from walls to flooring to even the way they ran electrical, the way they, set
Mm-hmm.
everything up. Um, I I didn't understand how this concept would come in here, take over, and basically do nothing to the kitchen, and do everything outside in the dining area, because that's in public. Um, that's a public's perception of the location. So that's the first thing they see when they walk in, and which I understand. You want to make it presentable. You want to make sure that people feel either it's a great vibe and it's comforting, or it's what they're looking for. But then you do nothing to the kitchen, and I started having conversations with the chef, with the owner, and kind of described, hey, these are concerning areas. The other thing is, it's like, does this actually work with your workflow in the kitchen? Is this how you're going to maneuver operations to make sure that they're able to produce your product? And in those conversations, I think I want to say the light turned on, and they started thinking about that more and more. And honestly, they held off. Unfortunately, they had already signed the lease, which kind of put them. They're held to a timeline to make sure that they're paying rent at a certain time frame. And unfortunately, it's like, yeah, they decided even then the sacrifice of stopping, confirming that the right layout for their kitchen is way is a direction to go to help them in the future to make sure that they're going to be functioning. Do we get that job right now? No, but it's something in the future, and that's our intent, is to help our clients make sure that they're doing you know the best possible outcome for their restaurant or whatever it may be. So
Yeah, and that's I think I've talked about this a little bit on my LinkedIn page. Is there's this pressure to move really fast, and you're not getting into a business to be there for a year.
right,
You're getting into it to be there for 5, 10, 15, 20. I mean, 5 is very short.
it is.
That would be like in a situation where you're trying to ramp up and like sell,
Right.
like, which is not super common. Like it's, I'm not in our space. Like, most people are like wanting to stay in it for many years, right?
Yeah.
You're signing a lease at the very minimum for 10 years.
Exactly.
So like you're going to live with those decisions, which I think there's probably another conversation about leases and how dangerous they are.
Yeah.
But I think that like, yeah, I mean, I think we both agree on this. Like, it's better maybe to pay the first month's rent and not be open and get it right than it is to rush to get it open so that you can, pay first month's rent
Right.
out of the cash that you bring in. And there's nothing worse to watch a restaurant just start off on the wrong foot where they're immediately behind. But yeah, I mean, why do you think people, and I don't want to take us off into leases, but like, why do you think, like, I don't know, maybe you can relate this to this space, but like, why do you think somebody comes in and signs a lease too early? Walk me through how that would even happen, because it happens a lot.
It happens a lot. I think, this concept is one of those things where it's like, yeah, they had an idea, they had a vision. Unfortunately, they didn't look at every aspect of it and kind of just jumped into it saying, this can be done here. This looks like it's functionable. And, hey, let's just spruce it up, make it presentable, and then that way we can open this place up. Well, sometimes it's that. I think the client may not fully, those people that are just starting their new location, just starting their new concept that they want to bring up, creates that unknown. And I think that some of that is where they aren't sure what size they're going to need. They're not sure how their concept's going to function. They're not sure. So that's why the consultants are important, to bring them into the picture, to kind of develop something. And basically it's your baseline, right? That's where you start. That's where hey, I need something this size. This is what I'm thinking. For example, this is my menu. So I know I'm going to need griddles, I'm going to need a deep fryer, I'm going to need X, Y, and Z. So you start learning what equipment you need. And then you get kind of a layout. Could you modify that layout? Yes. But this would be your ideal layout. That's where you start. Then you start growing from there. The problem is, if they're not looking at that and they don't understand that, they think it's going to fit. It's just a hypothetical. It's a
napkin drawing.
It is. It's a napkin drawing that they put together. And, at this point, it's like, okay, that's great. I'm glad that you think that. But now you got to put it into an actual box, a building, right? Now you got to put it in there, and you got to make sure it fits. And you got to make sure that, you're accommodating for everything you need. If you start cutting some of those pieces out, what does that do? How does that affect you in the future? How does that affect your menu? How does that affect everything? And I think they're not thinking of that clearly. And, that's where, unfortunately, they're quick to pull the trigger, sign the lease, get into that space because they want to produce it, but they also don't know the process of how to get to the right size building.
Yeah. And I think that we're going to do another conversation on why a landlord would want to sign someone up like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious,
Yeah.
but obviously it's from a landlord perspective, you want a partner long term,
Right.
but also you need someone to fill the space so that you recoup your own investment into whether you purchased the building or you've renovated it to prepare it for the next tenant or whatever. And so I think that there's obviously incentive on the landlord to fill the space. But I think for a general contractor, sure, and you mentioned it earlier, it would benefit us from someone just handing us the plans and us okay, we'll take your money and we'll just go with this. For us, it's it's not our responsibility to make sure you succeed once you're gone, right? Once we're
done
once
building
you're there.
it, yeah.
That's on you. But that's where I feel we're different. Mm-hmm. And it's we do care. And we come from this mindset of, not that other general contractors don't care, but we care enough to we want to be partners in poking holes in what you're doing.
Right.
And, we come from, certainly the train of thought that I've been trained in and grown up in is, poke 1,000 holes in this and see if it still floats.
Yeah.
And one of the largest by far is the space hole.
Yeah.
That is a massive thing that has to be right. Exactly. The only way you're making up for it is very consistent year over year sales comp, mm-hmm. Where you're offsetting the rent increases, you're offsetting the unknowns for unforeseens in your space. You're able to, to take on, the demands of the business. And it really is interesting because, again, for me, if you're in a smaller space and you've really optimized the space and you've optimized your menu, and you've thought really carefully about what equipment you're going to be in there, you're reducing more and more of those long-term unforeseen, costs. Equipment alone, we were just having a conversation about, a kitchen type that has this very cumbersome, kitchen layout. The equipment is all kind of like interconnected, and it can't just be fully dismantled. Like, it needs to be craned out.
Right.
And then, parts of the restaurant need to be rebuilt and, craned out, and then new equipment come in and then rebuilt for just, a piece of equipment that lasts, 5 to 7 years and maybe 10 to 15 at its best. But it's at that point, it's not working very well. And so there's just like, I think with less space, you're forced to really be thoughtful about like, what's on my menu? How am I going to run this in the back of house? What kind of front of house do I want? And patio space do I want? And like, I don't want to, state the obvious, but like more and more of the restaurant experience is, away from the facility. It's also, obviously extremely important, the building itself, which is like the whole point of this conversation. But there's elements of your business that even serving your customer that's not coming to the store is going to make an impact on your size. And so there's all these just micro decisions that really add up, and it all comes back down to taking the time before you build,
Right.
to make sure that you have this ideal size space, that before you ever look for a space, generally how big you need it to be. Because then, and this is why we chose to do space first, was then when you start to go to location and trade area, what size you can, sort of shop for. And then you can be confident once you find that space, like, okay, this is how I'm going to adjust my, plan, because it's not going to fit perfectly, because the different spaces available are going to be slightly different than what you, sort of plan for.
Right.
And you're going to modify it to be here. And if X number of dollars are coming from, delivery, third party, e-commerce, then you can, modify that space to do that. Like a retail shop, I'm thinking of one, and specifically, their spaces are meant to really just be a spot where somebody can come in and experience their clothing in person, right? It's almost like a tangible representation of their brand. You can touch the fabric, you can feel the essence of who they are, and they've done it really well. Yeah. So the size of the space doesn't need to be, it's not meant to have like racks and racks and racks of clothing.
Right.
Like they're predominantly e-commerce. Like I want to say like 99%, like they're not there to sell clothes. They're there to showcase it.
Yeah.
And so conceptually you get that, you're like, okay, well, we can really modify the space. So you're yes, you want to be in this, elevated lifestyle center, right, in this like elevated, area of, I'm trying to say it like nicely, but like in this like very ritzy area.
Yeah.
Like you want to be in a specific center, but like, let's get that space really small so the landlord can, maybe, create multiple spaces so that person's happy or that company's happy, but you're also carrying, less rent, long term.
Yeah.
And so, and the same thing is just with restaurants. It's conceptually exactly the same. You want to get into that sweet spot and do the work before you build to get it right. And then when we come in and we execute on construction, it's relatively straightforward. It's actually easier to build a project that's been thought through,
yeah,
than it is to build a project that, is clearly like have some disintegrated pieces.
No, agreed. And it's funny how naturally it comes, to me, to us, as far as that incorporating our suggestions or discussing our suggestions, giving options to the owner. It's nice. And whenever you can start something from the beginning and see it all the way through, there's nothing that makes it easier than that, right? You guys are on the same plane. You guys are discussing the same project. You're seeing it the same way, and it makes things much more streamlined.
What is, I really have two more questions for you. One is why, like, why does that happen where, why does it happen that we could be on two different pages? Like, how does that happen?
So everybody has their vision, right? Everybody has their idea. Their imagination is different than your imagination. I look at, as you mentioned before, I look at it a little different. I see, here's an example. I want to say we build it per what the plan shows, right? The plan shows some staggered, I want to say staggered tile. It could be a design flaw that, that's kind of what you expected to see. You expected to see it a certain way, but when it is actually in place, it's completely different. Your color schemes, a lot of people say, hey, paint it white. Well, there's hundreds of shades of white, which makes it nearly impossible to figure out what color you are really reflecting.
You're spot on. There was a time where we picked a tile that looked white, and it showed up and it had like intentional discrepancies on
Right. They called it rustic.
which we did not want.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, that was dictated by the health department requiring that specific tile because it had that gloss over it that would make it, non-porous. So the issue there is that we didn't anticipate that having that rustic look, and it looked almost as if there were missing or chips.
But it was
on the tile.
It was a great example of, like, you came into my office with a box of tiles.
Yeah.
And you're like, I have some bad news. Like, this is what this looks like.
Yeah.
But we're so, it's owner operator, construction, GC, working together hand in hand the whole way through, where there's trust and there's where you're going to bring it to me.
Right. Versus just
theoretically, you could throw those up there.
Right, and just put them in.
That is on the plan.
Okay, that's it. Yeah.
And we've driven up. We've come to sites where, per plan, it was clearly, you can have two different areas of the plan say two different things for reasons that are not worth going into right now.
Yeah.
And we've literally arrived at sites where the building itself is painted the wrong color, clearly. And, we know that because it's, if we're, deeply involved in a project, we know what the color of the building should be. And so we show up, we see it, and you're like, okay, that's wow. But technically, you could make an argument that per plan it's saying to do this. Now, obviously, I think most GC would make that situation right. But in a sense of, like, they probably, would fix it on their dime. Mm-hmm. But my point is to say that there are every single project that are opportunities to have a conversation with the owner operator to make thoughtful changes that are going to benefit them. But it is a lot less when you have your ducks in a row and you've thought through a lot of these items before the build even starts.
Exactly.
Because even when you have a very sophisticated system in place, and you have a very sophisticated brand, and et cetera, there are still, every project, those opportunities. There are times, like, I don't even want to know when you don't.
Yeah. No, and I mean, that's where you can have a different vision than the owner.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that happens, and happens a lot. And unless the contractor or, somebody brings it to their attention to make sure and confirm, that can just.
Well, I think of even, like, some of, the superintendents that we've managed over the years, and the amount of questions that come up that are really important, but that don't need to involve the owner, but like they, because of the way that we operate. So like, there's trust in you to make those decisions. You're making it as an owner operator essentially, but those would, there would be so many that would come up.
Yeah.
That it would be like very overwhelming to answer all of those questions. I mean, anything from like, I'm thinking of like grab and go coolers of like missing, a measurement by whatever, but changing like the design of like a POS, the layout of a POS counter.
Yeah.
Or like, there's been so many times where just things that are just tough decisions, right? Like you put a grab and go cooler in an enclosed cabinet that you can't change the filters.
Yeah.
Or like an ice cabinet that you can't get into to, service the machine. Like there's just so many things that, yes, an owner theoretically would want to know, but from a general contracting standpoint, like you can, in time and in trust and in relationship, like prevent a lot of that noise from, number one, harming you long term in your business via the building.
Right.
Or two, like becoming this just very overwhelming, like bog you down decision-making process once you're in the middle of construction, which is like the worst time to be making decisions on the fly.
It is.
Because you got timelines and contracts and money flying around.
Yeah, yeah. And not to mention, it's typically more costly to do it right then and there versus...
Right, because you're on the hook.
You're on the hook already.
Yeah, so I think in summary, I would love to hear your summary thought here. For me, in summary, size is one of the most significant decisions you make. And I like to start smaller and kind of probably flow from there. Obviously, it depends on the concept. It depends on the heart and the intention. But I think that's where I land.
Yeah.
Start small and think outward from there. That doesn't mean that you start with the size of the space as your sort of conceptual beginning of your business.
Right.
I'm just saying, when it comes to size, like let's start smaller and work it out. That would be like, size matters. Let's start small, work it out from there to simplify it.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I agree.
Well, in your own way, from your own perspective. Like that's what comes to mind when I'm talking about
when
size.
you're talking about size. Yeah, for me, it's also due diligence, right? Make sure that you're looking at those aspects, making sure that you don't jump into something that, maybe you shouldn't have. Look at your base needs, and like you said, work your way out from there. Once you have that base layout, that's what's going to help you determine what you can do then. You can accommodate whatever amount of seating you're going to need, or the building that you find, it accommodates your footprint for your kitchen per se. And then you could see, hey, how many seats can I get in here? Then start working your way out. So I think that's the ideal situation, right? Make sure you have not just a napkin sketch, but make sure you have something concrete that could make your restaurant or whatever facility you decide to build function to the best of its abilities, and then expand from there. So I have the same kind of thought process, just making sure that the due diligence in front of it is done to help long term.
I agree too. Great. Well, episode 3, before you build, space matters, and that's why.
Yeah.